Neo, a city bathed in the glow of neon lights, where bustling streets hum with life amidst an undercurrent of danger and crime. In the shadowy heart of the city's most perilous district, Lucas, a legendary human mercenary, leaned casually against the grimy wall of the Crimson Nebula bar. His battle-worn combat armor contrasted sharply with the flashy attire of the alien patrons around him. Lucas wasn't just any mercenary. He was a symbol of human resilience and ingenuity, earning the moniker, the Reaper, for his unmatched combat skills and flawless mission record. This time, however, the stakes were different. He had been hired to rescue Aria, the princess of the Azure Dominion, from the notorious Helm gang, a ruthless criminal syndicate. The mission seemed simple: locate and bring Aria back unharmed. But in Neo's treacherous underworld, nothing was ever easy. According to intel, Aria was being held in the gang's fortified hideout. The Helm gang, infamous for cybernetic enhancements and illicit trade, were easily recognizable by their glowing orange visors and elongated helmets. Before embarking on the mission, Lucas had met Aria's father, King Nolan, in a private briefing at the Azure Palace. The king's holographic figure, with his emerald green complexion, had shimmered with both desperation and resolve. His offer had been substantial: 3 million credits up front, another 5 upon completion. But above all, bring my daughter back safe. Though the sum was tempting, Lucas didn't accept the job for the money. He lived by a code, and human trafficking, especially of a royal, was a line no one should cross. With a steely glint in his eyes, Lucas had agreed, his reputation for unwavering determination shining through. Standing before the Helm gang's compound now, Lucas assessed the situation. 2 guards flanked the entrance, their orange visors glowing ominously in the dim light. He stepped out of the shadows, his voice cold and commanding. "This is your only warning. Release Princess Aria, or face the wrath of a human mercenary." The guards laughed, their synthesized voices crackling through their helmet speakers. "One human? You must have a death wish," the taller one sneered. Lucas smirked faintly. "You'll regret that." When the fight erupted, Lucas moved like liquid lightning, showing exactly why he was called the Reaper. Before the guards could even raise their weapons, they were down. A shaped charge took out the compound's main door, opening a path straight into the heart of the base. Inside, chaos ensued. Members of the Helm gang scrambled to respond, but Lucas's precision and human adaptability made him unstoppable. Plasma shots streaked through the air as Lucas weaved between cover, his modified rifle taking down enemies with deadly accuracy. Finally, he reached the basement where Aria was held. She sat bound, her defiant gaze unwavering despite her disheveled appearance. Her black outfit was torn and dirty, but her presence was commanding. "Your father sent me," Lucas said, swiftly cutting through her restraints. "Behind you," Aria shouted suddenly. Lucas spun just in time to block an attack from the gang's leader, a hulking figure clad in advanced armor. The ensuing battle was fierce but brief, Lucas's superior reflexes and training overpowering the gang leader. As the leader crumpled to the ground, Lucas delivered his parting words. "You should have listened to my warning." As they emerged from the compound under Neo's flickering neon lights, Aria looked at Lucas with newfound respect. "I've never seen anyone fight like that," she admitted, her voice tinged with awe. Lucas shrugged, his tone measured. "Just doing my job, Princess." The journey back to the Azure Dominion had just begun, but Lucas knew this was far from over. The Helm gang wouldn't take this humiliation lightly, and darker forces might be lurking behind them. The streets of Neo blurred into a kaleidoscope of glowing lights and shadowed alleys as Lucas and Aria made their way to a secure rendezvous point. Lucas's every movement was calculated. His sharp instincts honed from years of surviving missions where failure meant death. Aria followed closely behind, her defiance now paired with trust in the man who had just saved her life. Lucas led her to a sleek, unmarked transport ship hidden in the docking sector's underbelly. Its design was simple but effective, a ship built for speed and stealth. As they boarded, Lucas's tactical mind was already running through every potential threat. "This ship doesn't look royal," Aria observed, settling into the co-pilot's seat. Her tone was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "It's not supposed to," Lucas replied without missing a beat. "A high-profile royal vessel would draw too much attention. This one's built for getting out unseen." As the ship's systems came online, Lucas's modified tactical interface flashed warning signals. Multiple heat signatures were detected on an intercept course. He tightened his grip on the controls, a grim expression crossing his face. "Looks like the Helm gang isn't giving up easily," he muttered. Aria leaned forward, her green eyes scanning the display. "Those aren't Helm gang ships. That's the Crimson Syndicate's fleet." Lucas raised an eyebrow at the name. The Crimson Syndicate was a notorious criminal organization rumored to have far-reaching influence across sectors. Their involvement meant this was more than just a kidnapping, it was a calculated power move. "You've made powerful enemies, Princess," Lucas remarked dryly, maneuvering the ship out of the docking bay. "Welcome to my life," Aria replied with a wry smile, though her gaze remained locked on the approaching ships. "They've been pressuring my father for mining rights on Azure's outer colonies for years. This must be their leverage." The first plasma bolts streaked past their ship as Lucas threw it into a sharp evasive maneuver. The ship's compact design allowed it to weave through Neo's cluttered orbital debris, its engines roaring with barely restrained power. "Hold on," Lucas warned, pulling the ship into a corkscrew spin that narrowly avoided a barrage of enemy fire. Aria gripped the armrests of her seat but showed no fear. "You're an exceptional pilot," she said, her voice steadied despite the chaos outside. Lucas allowed himself a brief smirk. "Human reflexes. We may not live as long as some species, but we make up for it in other ways." As the enemy ships closed in, Lucas's tactical display highlighted a dense debris field ahead. The wreckage of an ancient space battle loomed like a graveyard of metal and shattered dreams. Lucas's mind raced, calculating odds. "You're not planning to fly through that, are you?" Aria asked, her tone half incredulous, half impressed. "Most pilots wouldn't dare," Lucas replied, his hands steady on the controls. "But most pilots aren't me." The ship plunged into the debris field, maneuvering between jagged remnants of starships and drifting hunks of metal. Each turn required split-second decisions, but Lucas handled it with the calm precision of someone who thrived in chaos. Behind them, the Crimson Syndicate's ships hesitated, their pilots unwilling to risk the dangerous terrain. Lucas used the hesitation to his advantage, navigating deeper into the labyrinth of wreckage. "This isn't just about evasion," Aria realized, watching Lucas with newfound admiration. "You're leading them into a trap." Lucas didn't respond immediately, his focus locked on the display. Finally, he smirked. "You're quick to catch on." As the Syndicate ships regained their nerve and followed, Lucas executed a sharp turn, firing the ship's reverse thrusters. The sudden maneuver destabilized the leading enemy vessel. sending it careening into a floating hulk of debris. The resulting explosion lit up the field like fireworks. The remaining Syndicate ships broke formation, unsure whether to pursue or retreat. "One down," Lucas muttered, his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "Two to go." Aria's gaze lingered on him, a flicker of something unspoken in her expression. "You don't just fight to win, do you?" Lucas glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. "I fight to survive. And I make sure those who come after me think twice." The Syndicate ships regrouped, their engines burning red trails against the void. Lucas's tactical display flashed another warning, tractor beams locking onto their ship. "They're trying to box us in," Aria said, her voice steady but tense. Lucas grinned. "Then they're about to learn why you don't corner a human." What followed was a daring display of ingenuity. Using the tractor beam's own energy, Lucas overloaded the system, triggering a controlled explosion that sent their ships spiraling between the Syndicate vessels. The maneuver forced the two ships to break their lock or risk colliding with one another. "Impossible," Aria whispered as the Syndicate ships veered off course, struggling to recover. Lucas gave her a sidelong glance. Impossible's just another word for untested. As they emerged from the debris field, the Syndicate's ships finally fell behind. Their pursuit halted. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tension. "You've saved me twice now," Aria said softly, her voice carrying a rare vulnerability. "That's not something I'll forget." Lucas shrugged, though her words seemed to linger in the air. "Just doing my job, Princess." For the first time, Aria smiled, genuine and worn. "It's Aria." Lucas's eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Aria. Then, let's get you home." But Lucas knew the journey was far from over. The Crimson Syndicate wasn't the kind of enemy to retreat so easily. And as the stars stretched into endless streaks of light through hyperspace, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was about to become far more personal than he'd ever intended. The ship hummed softly as it glided through hyperspace, a temporary reprieve from the chaos that had nearly consumed them. Lucas sat at the helm, scanning the ship's systems for damage. Aria lingered behind him, observing the human with a quiet intensity. "You didn't have to come for me. You know," she said eventually, breaking the silence. "My father has other soldiers, armies even." Lucas didn't turn around, his fingers deftly adjusting the controls. "Your father hired me because armies make noise. I get things done." Aria tilted her head, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Efficient and modest." "I see." Lucas finally glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm not here for glory, Princess. Just results." They shared a quiet meal in the cockpit as hyperspace streaks painted the view outside. It was the first moment of calm since Neo, but the tension between them was palpable. Aria broke the silence. "You're not like the mercenaries I've heard about. Most wouldn't risk their lives for something like this." Lucas leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "Maybe they don't have rules." "I do." "What kind of rules?" "No trafficking. No innocence. No unnecessary killing," Lucas said simply. "I take the jobs that need doing, not the ones that pay the most." Aria studied him, her emerald green eyes narrowing slightly. "You're different. Most humans I've met, they don't have your sense of honor." Lucas shrugged. "We're not all the same. Just like your kind." Her expression softened, and for a moment, The walls between them seemed to lower. "You're more than just a soldier, Lucas." The ship sensors chimed, pulling them both out of the moment. Lucas frowned at the display. Another approaching vessel. "Trouble?" Aria asked, leaning forward. "Not yet," Lucas muttered. "But I don't trust unmarked ships." The vessel matched their speed, staying just out of firing range. Lucas's jaw tightened as he maneuvered into a defensive position. Suddenly, a transmission came through. The voice was smooth, almost taunting. "Lucas. Long time no see." Lucas stiffened. He recognized the voice immediately. Victor. An old ally turned rival. Now the leader of the Helm Syndicate's mercenary division. "Victor." Lucas replied coldly. "To what do I owe the honor?" Victor's holographic image flickered to life on the console. His grizzled features and cybernetic enhancements gave him an imposing air. "You've made quite a mess, old friend," Victor said, his tone almost amused. "Taking the princess. The Syndicate isn't happy." "I don't care about the Syndicate," Lucas shot back. "And you're no friend of mine." Victor chuckled darkly. "Fair enough. But you've bitten off more than you can chew this time. Turn her over, and I'll make sure you get out of this alive." Lucas didn't hesitate. "Not a chance." Victor's smile faded. "Then you leave me no choice." The transmission cut out, and the unmarked vessel began closing the distance. "Buckle up," Lucas said as he prepared for combat. Aria strapped herself into her seat, her expression tense. "Who is he?" "Someone I used to trust," Lucas said curtly. "He's dangerous, but he doesn't know how to finish what he starts." The enemy ship opened fire, plasma bolts lighting up the void. Lucas's hands moved with practiced precision, pulling the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers. "You're really going to fight him?" Aria asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Lucas glanced at her, a glint of determination in his eyes. "No. I'm going to outsmart him." The ensuing chase was a deadly dance through hyperspace corridors. Lucas used every trick in his book, looping through asteroid clusters, cutting power to create ghost signatures, and even pulling off a maneuver that left Victor's ship firing into empty space. "He's relentless," Aria observed, gripping her armrests as Lucas executed a sharp turn. "So am I," Lucas replied. Finally, Lucas guided their ship toward a derelict mining station floating in the expanse. He cut the engines and powered down the systems, cloaking their presence. "He'll think we're gone," Lucas said, his voice calm but firm. Aria leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You always have a plan, don't you?" Lucas smirked faintly. "It's how I've stayed alive this long." Inside the silence of the power-down ship, the tension between them returned. Aria's gaze lingered on Lucas as he inspected their systems. "Victor said something about you making a mess," she began cautiously. "What did he mean?" Lucas hesitated, his hands pausing over the console. "It's a long story. I'm not going anywhere," Aria said softly. Lucas sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Victor and I used to work together. We fought side by side in a dozen campaigns. But greed got the better of him. He took jobs that crossed the line, jobs I couldn't stomach. When I walked away, he saw it as betrayal." Aria nodded slowly, piecing together the fragments of his past. "And now he works for the Syndicate. It's a natural fit," Lucas said bitterly. "He'll do anything for power." Her expression softened. "And you'll do anything for honor. That's why you're different." For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the ship. Then Aria spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't just save me because it's your job, did you?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "No," he admitted after a long pause. "I didn't." The unspoken connection between them deepened. But before either could say more, the ship sensors came alive with warning signals. Victor's ship had found them. "We're not done yet," Lucas said, his voice hardening as he powered the ship back online. "And we're not giving up," Aria replied, her confidence mirroring his resolve. Victor's ship loomed on the display, its weapon systems locked and ready. Lucas's jaw tightened as he brought their transport to full power, the ship's engines roaring back to life. "He doesn't give up easily, does he?" Aria asked, strapping herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Neither do I," Lucas replied, his hands steady on the controls. "But this time, we're ending it." Victor's voice crackled through the comms once again, smug and taunting. "You're cornered, Lucas. Even you can't outrun me forever." Lucas cut the transmission without responding, his focus entirely on the tactical display. Aria glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "What's the plan?" she asked. Lucas smirked faintly. "We hit back." The first barrage of plasma fire streaked toward them as Lucas pulled the ship into a steep dive, narrowly avoiding the incoming shots. He activated the ship's countermeasures, deploying chaff that confused Victor's targeting systems. "Hold on tight," Lucas warned as he dove straight toward a nearby asteroid field. The jagged rocks spun lazily in the void, remnants of a shattered moon. It was a death trap for most pilots, but Lucas saw it as an opportunity. "You're not seriously flying into that?" Aria asked, gripping the armrests of her seat. "Victor's not the only one who can set traps," Lucas replied. The ship wove through the dense asteroid field with uncanny precision. Lucas's hands moved like a blur across the controls, his instincts guiding him through the chaotic terrain. Victor's ship followed, its weapons firing blindly in an attempt to keep up. "He's gaining on us," Aria said, her voice tense. "Let him," Lucas replied calmly. "He's walking into his own doom." Ahead, Lucas spotted a massive asteroid with a hollowed-out center, an abandoned mining cavity. He adjusted their trajectory, steering toward the cavern's entrance. "You're going to hide in there?" Aria asked. "Not hide," Lucas corrected. "Ambush." The moment they entered the asteroid, Lucas powered down the ship's systems, cloaking their energy signature. The darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint glow of distant stars filtering through cracks in the rock. "Stay quiet," Lucas whispered. Seconds later, Victor's ship entered the cavern, its searchlight sweeping across the jagged walls. Lucas's fingers hovered over the controls, waiting for the perfect moment. When Victor's ship passed beneath them, Lucas struck. He fired the ship's rear thrusters, creating a blinding burst of light that overloaded Victor's sensors. At the same time, Lucas launched a pair of precision-guided charges, targeting the enemy's engines. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, sending Victor's ship spiraling out of control. "Direct hit," Aria said, her voice tinged with awe. Lucas didn't celebrate. "It's not over yet." Victor's ship recovered, though its movements were sluggish. Lucas maneuvered behind it, His weapons locked on. Before he could fire, Victor's voice came through the comms again, this time tinged with desperation. "Lucas. Wait." Lucas hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. "I'm unarmed." Victor continued. "You've won. Let's talk." Aria glanced at Lucas, her expression wary. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" Lucas's jaw tightened. Victor doesn't deserve a second chance. But sometimes, letting someone live sends a stronger message. Lucas deactivated his weapons and transmitted a final warning. "You come after us again, and I'll make sure there's nothing left of you or your ship." Victor's response was a bitter silence, followed by the retreat of his damaged vessel. Lucas watched until Victor's ship disappeared from the sensors, then leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. "Why did you let him go?" Aria asked. Lucas's expression softened slightly. "Because killing him would have been too easy. He'll spend the rest of his life knowing he lost." Aria nodded, her respect for Lucas growing. "You're not what I expected, Lucas." He glanced at her, his smirk returning. "You've said that before." As they exited the asteroid field, the silence between them was comfortable, almost companionable. Aria studied Lucas, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't yet put into words. Finally, she broke the quiet. "What happens now?" Lucas stared out at the stars, his expression unreadable. "We take you home. But be ready, Aria. This isn't over. The Syndicate will keep coming." She leaned closer, her voice steady. "Then let them. As long as I have you, I'm not afraid." Lucas met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. For the first time in years, he felt the faint stirrings of hope, not just for the mission, but for something more. The Azure Dominion shimmered like a jewel in the darkness of space, its capital city aglow with golden lights and spiraling towers. As Lucas guided the transport ship into the royal docking bay, his mind was sharp and focused, though he couldn't ignore the faint tension thrumming beneath the surface. Aria sat beside him, her green skin illuminated by the soft glow of the control panels. "You're unusually quiet," she observed, her voice gentle. Lucas smirked faintly but kept his eyes on the landing sequence. "I'm just thinking about what comes next. Returning you is one thing. Keeping you safe, that's another." She placed a hand lightly on his arm. "Lucas, I trust you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Her words lingered in the air as the ship touched down with a soft hiss. The docking bay was a flurry of activity. Armed guards in pristine uniforms stood at attention, their weapons lowered as King Nolan emerged from a grand corridor. His emerald green complexion reflected the soft glow of the palace lights, his expression a mix of relief and resolve. "Aria," he called, his deep voice carrying across the expanse. Aria stepped forward, her composure momentarily breaking as she embraced her father. "I'm safe, Father," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "Thanks to Lucas." King Nolan's gaze shifted to the human mercenary. "Lucas," he said, his tone formal yet warm, "I owe you a debt far greater than credits. You've not only saved my daughter but preserved the future of our people." Lucas inclined his head, his expression as unreadable as ever. "I did what I was hired to do, Your Majesty." "Perhaps," Nolan replied, a knowing glint in his eye. "But I suspect your motives go deeper than that." Lucas said nothing, Though Aria's soft smile suggested the king's words rang true. The moment of reunion was short-lived. A palace aide hurried forward, a holographic tablet in hand. "Your Majesty." "Urgent news," the aide said. "Syndicate forces have been spotted near the outer colonies. We believe they're preparing for retaliation." Nolan's expression hardened. "Then they underestimate us. Prepare the fleet." Lucas stepped forward. "The Syndicate won't stop. Not until they've had their revenge. They know what Aria means to you, and to them." Nolan turned to Lucas, his gaze steady. "And what do you propose?" Lucas's voice was firm. "You need more than soldiers. You need someone who knows how the Syndicate operates. Someone who can strike before they do." Aria's eyes lit up with a mix of determination and admiration. "He's right, Father. Let him help us." After a long pause, Nolan nodded. "Very well. Lucas, consider yourself part of the Azure Dominion. Together, we'll ensure the Syndicate never threatens us again." The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Lucas worked alongside Azure's military strategists, sharing his insights into Syndicate tactics. Aria, too, played a critical role, using her diplomatic skills to rally support from neighboring systems. Amidst the chaos, Lucas and Aria grew closer. Their bond, forged in the crucible of danger, deepened into something undeniable. One evening, as they stood on a palace balcony overlooking the city, Aria turned to Lucas, her gaze unwavering. "Do you ever wonder how all of this happened?" she asked. Lucas smirked. "What?" "Rescuing a princess from a gang of cybernetic thugs. Happens all the time." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I mean us. This connection, it feels bigger than anything I've known." Lucas's expression softened. "Maybe it is. But if I've learned anything, it's that some things are worth fighting for." Their conversation was interrupted by the faint cry of a proximity alarm. Lucas's instincts flared as the sound echoed through the palace halls. The command center was alive with activity as reports flooded in. Syndicate forces were mobilizing, their fleet appearing on the edges of Azure's territory. The threat was immediate and undeniable. "They're coming for us," Nolan said grimly, addressing the gathered leaders. "But we will not falter." Lucas stepped forward. "We have the advantage. They'll expect you to defend. But we'll strike first. Let me lead the charge." Nolan hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Do what you must." The battle that followed was nothing short of legendary. Lucas, commanding a squadron of Azure's finest pilots, led a daring assault on the Syndicate fleet. Using his unmatched tactical mind, he outmaneuvered the enemy at every turn, exploiting their weaknesses with precision. Meanwhile, Aria coordinated efforts from the ground, her voice a beacon of hope over the communication channels. "Stay strong," she urged. "We fight not just for Azure, but for a future free from fear." When the dust settled, the Syndicate's fleet was in ruins, their forces scattered. The victory was decisive, but it came at a cost, one that left the people of Azure more determined than ever to protect what they held dear. Back in the palace, Lucas and Aria stood side by side, the weight of the battle etched into their features. "You did it," she said softly. Lucas shook his head. "We did it." Nolan approached, his expression a mix of pride and gratitude. "You've done more than I ever could have asked. Lucas, you've given us hope." Lucas met the king's gaze, his own resolve unwavering. "The Syndicate underestimated us. They won't make that mistake again. As the stars stretched across the night sky, Lucas and Aria found themselves once more on the balcony. "So, what now?" Aria asked, her voice light but curious. Lucas glanced at her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "We rebuild. And when the next fight comes, we'll be ready." Aria leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm glad you're here, Lucas. With you, I feel safe." For the first time in years, Lucas allowed himself to believe in a future worth fighting for, not just for Azure, but for the bond they had forged. As they stood together beneath the endless stars, it was clear that their journey was far from over. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together.